Welcome, Bronco Nation, to the review of your Boise State Mountain West champion Broncos. Bronco Nation, what a season to be able to sit here and say that Boise State is the champions of the Mountain West after everything that we saw this season, after opening the year the way that we did, after finishing, except for the last two games of this year, the way that we did. For Boise State to be sitting here after all of that, after a season for Boise State that was looking like it might be worse than even what 2023 was trending towards, to be able to sit here and say that Boise State has finished the year not only as Mountain West champions, but now they're going to go and play a beatable Big Ten program in Washington in the LA Bowl and have a shot. Not necessarily they're going to be favored in that game, but have a shot at a 10-win season to end their final year in the Mountain West before they go over to the Pac-12. Yes, we didn't end up in the playoffs like we wanted to. We know we're not going to end up in the top 25 to finish out the season, but for everything to unravel, not just transpire, but to unravel the way that it did, for Boise State to claw its way back into national relevance. Once again, not that winning the Mountain West Championship means anything very much, and it's not going to put you in the CFP conversation, but Boise State coming into 2026, the Pac-12, there's going to be media conversation about that. If Boise State had finished the way that we thought they were going to, it would have been a different conversation regarding Boise State. But now they're entering the Pac-12 as the conference champions of the Mountain West, which is essentially what the new Pac-12 is. It's basically the current Mountain West with a couple of new teams added and then some of the bottom feeders cut out. To be able to enter that, they're going to enter in potentially, most likely, as favorites to win that conference. They're going to be getting a lot more media buzz. All of this has set Boise State up in a perfect position for 2026. So while we can and should be disappointed about what this season could have been, the fact that we are sitting here when we could have very much have been in a very different spot, and be disappointed about what it could have been on the good side, but also be excited that we're not where it also could have been on the downside. The fact that we're sitting here looking back at a Boise State team that are Mountain West champions for the third year in a row for Boise State, the first time that they've ever done that. They've won the Mountain West championship 3 times in a row to finish their time in this conference and move on to bigger and brighter things in 2026. Could not be more proud of this program, the way the players have rallied through so much adversity to finish where they are. And we as Boise State fans can sit back and look forward to 2026. Yes, there's things that need to be fixed. We'll go through some of them in this video. There's positives, there's a ton of things to be excited about. But yes, at the same time, there are things that still need to be fixed. But at the end of the day, we can look at a Boise State program that is leaving with their heads held high, finishing the way that they absolutely needed to. Not just wanted to this year, but they needed to end. The Mountain West, no team in this conference can now say, when it's Boise State versus other group of 6 programs vying for a spot in the playoffs, Boise State maybe versus UNLV or some other Mountain West team, no team in this conference that we're leaving behind can ever say, well, we beat you, or this team that we beat you, or you're not as good as you say we are because we hold this over. They can't hold anything. They cannot hold anything. Boise State leaves no baggage behind. They cut, strings gone, and they move on to the Pac-12, where they can then continue another decade and decade and decade after that of dominance like they have the last 20 years in every conference that they have been in. So for Boise State, I am incredibly excited to be able to sit down here and review this Boise State game. We're going to go over the offense, the defense, the special teams, look how Boise State performed in each of those areas, give it a grade overall to each of those, and then we'll also look how Boise State performed against my keys to the game. Of course, this week, previewing this matchup, had Jalen Henderson on. Awesome discussion. Even if you don't go back and watch that whole video, it's like an hour and a half long, I would really encourage you to go back and at least watch that first half of that video. He gave some great discussion points about Max Madsen versus Max Cutforth, and then also just the thought process of how these players feel. A little bit of an interview session, just how he felt coming into the Mountain West Championship game. Great video. Put the link to the description. Highly recommend you check it out. Obviously, he's not here with me today, so we're just back to the traditional solo format for this game review, but we're going to get into it. We're going to look at the keys to the game for Boise State, as well as overall offensive, defensive, and special teams performance. Before we do that, I want to make sure I remember to give the score prediction shout out. this is not just that Boise State ends the way they need to. The score prediction challenge, at least for this portion of the season, ends the way it needs to. There'll be one more for the bowl games. You have one more chance to try and go out and win this Ashton Jeanty jersey, get entered in a raffle to win that. So you have one more chance coming to you. But the score prediction challenge, as far as the Mountain West slate and everything, ends the way that it needed to with a perfect score prediction. I am pretty sure, I may be blanking on one, but I'm 99% positive this is the first time we've had a perfect score prediction this season. So huge shout out. There were a lot of great score predictions, but this is the only one that was perfect, to Craig Watts 6601 for predicting 38-21. Now, if you take Jalen Henderson's score prediction and my score prediction and put them together, we're actually perfect too. I was predicting 34-21, so I got the defensive score right, and he's predicting 38-27, so we got the offensive score. So I'm going to take a partial credit victory for that one, but outstanding job, Craig. Thank you, everyone who's participated in the score prediction challenge all the way through. And again, everyone, you get one more chance to try and win this Ashton Jeanty jersey and to get entered in the raffle to win the Ashton Jeanty jersey. One more chance for the preview for the bowl game, which I will have another guest coming on for that one. I'll talk about that at the end of this video. All right, before we get any further in, that's the intro real quick. Before we get any further in, make sure you pick yourself up a bottle of Horseshoe Spirits. Of course, Horseshoe Spirit Studios welcome in everybody. Make sure you pick yourself up a bottle of Horseshoe Spirits. Obviously, as you've seen, I have enjoyed this myself. Fantastic drinking alcohol. Obviously, it looks great. You get to support Boise State NIL. So there's other reasons to purchase, but the biggest reason you should purchase anything is because it tastes good. Well, not anything. You should be purchasing cars because of that. But anytime you're purchasing anything that's a food or drink substance, the first thought process should be, is it a quality product? And Horseshoe Spirits certainly is. If you live in the southwest of Idaho, you can pick up a bottle at any store, any liquor store in the southwest of Idaho. If you don't live in the greatest state in the union, then you can buy it online. I'll put a link in the description. If you buy 6 or more bottles, the shipping is free. Christmas is just around the corner. It's going to be your last chance to get that perfect Christmas present for the Boise State fan in your life. And if you buy 3 to 6 bottles, then it's 50% off. Of course, make sure that you're 21 or older. Make sure that you apply with all state laws as applicable, and make sure that you drink responsibly. But bourbon, rum, vodka, compound gin, a fantastic assortment for any Boise State fan or non-Boise State fan. It's a liquor does not distinguish whether you're a UNLV fan or a Boise State fan. And if you're a UNLV fan and want to try and get over this loss a little bit, pick yourself up a bottle of Horseshoe liquor on your way out of town. All right. Boise State versus UNLV game review. Boise State wins this game 35-21, and they do it behind the returning Maddox Matson. Now, we all had opinions on this. Some were in the camp of Maddox Matson's the rightful starter. He needs to come back and resume his starting positions. He didn't do too poorly when he was the leader, and he's back now. Others were in the camp, and I'll admit I was certainly in this camp. And to a certain extent, I still am in this camp, that Max Cutforth finished off this season strong. The offense looked different under him, more exciting, more explosive than had at any other point this season. Not necessarily because he's a better quarterback per se. I think we need a true quarterback battle to determine that. But for whatever reason, the offense flowed better, and he was the one who finished the season strong with 2 wins to get Boise State to this point. He was the hot hand. We needed to feed him, and he should have been the starting quarterback. I still think that Max Cutforth could have won this game, but the argument is mute because the truth is that Maddox Matson came back, was not rusty, or if he was, it didn't show too much. There's some issues here and there, but really not that less typical than any other Maddox Matson game that we've seen so far, and he won this matchup and was the key reason that Boise State won this game. Now, I said when he went out that he was the emotional leader for this team, and that is certainly true. Regardless of whether or not he was going to be the starter, his emotional impact for this team was huge. And Spencer Danielson said as much when asked about this decision. He said, Max has done great things for us, to paraphrase a little bit, but Max has done great things for us, but when the players hear Maddox Matson's voice, it's go time. And that is when you're looking at a team and you're looking at factors beyond just necessarily the physical level. When Spencer Danielson says that Maddox Matson is the only quarterback in the country that we would want for the starting quarterback of our team, he's not necessarily meaning that Maddox Matson should win the Heisman because he's the best quarterback in the country, but he is meaning that he's the most important to the chemistry of this program. And that showed. Maddox Matson carried this team through. Was not rusty per se. The first drive wasn't great, but he picked up pretty quickly after that. Looked pretty much the same as he has in most of his games. Clearly looked like the injury was still bothering him, especially late in this game. But overall, Maddox Matson won this game 17-31 for 289 yards, 3 touchdowns, 0 interceptions, and 1 rushing touchdown. We're going to go over a lot of positives in this video. And one of the big positives is Maddox Matson performing so well. But I do want to address something right off the bat, because I don't want what happened today to be evidence, basically case closed, that Maddox Matson should be, without a shadow of a doubt, the starter in 2026. I absolutely do not believe that that should be the guaranteed case. Could Maddox Matson be our starter? Does he deserve a chance to be the starter in 2026? Certainly. But when I look at Boise State, right now we're all excited. We are so pumped that Boise State just finished this year 9-4, getting, when they didn't look like they were going to be finishing in that area, finishing 9-4 and getting to not just a bowl game, but winning the Mountain West Championship and going and playing a Power 4 in a bowl game. That is super exciting. But the standard for Boise State, the standard that they set for themselves, is not 9-4 and get to a bowl game. The standard that Boise State sets for themselves is win a playoff game. And now, if you want to win a playoff game, you need to have the quarterback who is the absolute best on your team and one of the top quarterbacks, maybe the top quarterback, in the group of 6. They need to be one of the top quarterbacks in the country. Now, there's a lot of other factors that go into building a successful program. And obviously, there are a lot of elements there that you don't need the best player in every single position if the team as a whole is strong enough. But the quarterback is an essential position. You cannot have a player at the quarterback position that you don't know is going to be able to go out and win every single one of the games that is on your docket. And that's pretty much what it takes to get you to a playoff game and be able to go and win a playoff game. Now, Maddox Matson could be that quarterback for Boise State. But the only way to find out if he truly is that quarterback for Boise State is to have a true and open quarterback competition. Max Cufworth showed a lot as a walk-on. Boise State has a lot of exciting young freshmen that are joining this program that showed in their, obviously it's high school level, but they have that potential, and other programs saw that. Boise State's got 2 walk-ons right now as their 2 backups, but there's quarterbacks joining this team. Then you talk about ceilings of quarterbacks. They were looked at and recruited by multiple other programs, several of them Power 4 level programs that are coming to Boise State. Maddox Matson has done incredible things. He deserves a chance to be the starter. But this needs to be an open competition in 2026, or we will be looking back in 2026, excited that once again Boise State found a way to go 9, maybe 10 wins and win the Pac-12, but find themselves outside looking in for the playoffs. And if they get to the playoffs, looking like we did more closely in 2023. So for Boise State, 2024. So for Boise State to be successful going forward, we need to be excited about what we've seen so far. There are a lot of great things that we can build on, that should be replicated, that we'll talk about, that should get us amped up for 2026, excited about the potential, and hoping that they continue to build on and improve these good things that we've seen. But there are negatives, and there are cultural negatives, thought process negatives that need to be addressed. And the biggest one here is that I think Spencer Danielson got lucky with Maddox Matson. Maddox Matson coming in, not in the season role, but in this game. Maddox Matson coming in and doing what he did in this game is because that's who Maddox Matson is. When you give him a chance to be a fighter, because Maddox Matson is a fighter, he is going to show up against all the odds. When nobody believes in him, he is going to show up and fight and win. And that's what he did. But if you watched this game for Maddox Matson, in the first half, 11 of 17 for 186 yards overall. Finished the game 17 of 31. Only completed 6 passes in the second half. 186 yards in the first half. Finished the game with 289 yards. It was about 83 yards in the second half. Oh, sorry, not 83 yards. About 103 yards in the second half. And a lot of that was short passes that weren't very good that wide receivers made up for. He played really, really well. He had some really beautiful throws in the first half. But he was clearly still feeling the effects of this injury and not up stamina-wise to what would have been necessary if this was a shootout in the second half to win this game. Boise State is lucky. They are lucky that they did not need Maddox Matson to be first half Maddox Matson in the second half to win this game, because he wasn't. He was clearly banged up. He took a lot of hits, and you could see that his confidence, that his ability to read and also to set his feet and make the throw, and more importantly, to throw on the run, the power. He had a rollout pass in the first half, was really, really strong. Rollout pass in the second half, a completely short hop to the wide receiver. He clearly was not up stamina-wise and physically-wise to the level that you need from a quarterback in an absolute dogfight in the second half, but we didn't need that from Maddox Matson. Boise State got off to a huge start in this game, 28-7 at one point, and then just before the end of the half, 28-14 points, and most of that Maddox Matson. Huge jump off lead here in the first half offensively, and then Boise State was able to coast off of that into the second half. Now, some drop passes and other issues in the second half didn't help, but also Maddox Matson clearly was not the same quarterback second half that he was in the first half. When you pick a quarterback to be the starter for your game, you need to pick a quarterback that's going to be your quarterback for the matchup. And I think Spencer Danielson, when he decided on this matchup, somebody said it great in the comments on my last video. I don't think he ever thought for a second, if Maddox Matson was at all able to start, that that Max Cutforth was going to be in contention here. It was going to be Maddox Matson, Mad Dog, no matter what, rain or shine. If he could walk onto the field, he was going to be the quarterback for this game. Now, again, Maddox Matson, the energy, the fire, the stamina, the fight was enough to carry him through clear physical deficiencies from the injury he's still dealing with in the first half. In the second half, those showed up, and luckily, UNLV was out of this game enough that Boise State didn't end up suffering from that. So it's not a problem. It doesn't hurt Boise State. We win the game. But when you're talking about next season, when you're talking about wanting to set yourself up to be the team that is the top team in the group of 6, out of 6 conferences competing, they are the top team. And not just that they're one of the best teams in the country, regardless of conference. When you're talking about that, you need to be thinking through what is best for the program, what quarterback can carry you through the entire season in that area. And again, it could be Maddox Matson. We just haven't really been able to have the true benefit of seeing what Maddox Matson can truly do when pushed, because he wasn't pushed this season. And we also had a really, really lethargic, terrible offensive game plan for the majority of this year. So we don't know. But the only way to find out, the only way to guarantee that the best quarterback on your roster emerges as the starter is to enter the postseason with no biases and open competition and say whoever wins it runs onto the field. And my concern is that the thought process for why Maddox Matson started this game is going to carry into what happens next season, and it won't be a competition. It will just be Maddox Matson and people competing for second. And then we'll go throughout the rest of this year, and then we'll see. It'll be probably very similar to what we saw this season. Some very, very good games, some very, very bad games. Boise State in and out of it, not clearly on top, needing outside factors to win. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. And maybe we end up exactly where we are right now, happy for how the season ended, but also Boise State could have won this game and been in the playoffs. So all that to say, we're going to get into reviewing this game. And I'm incredibly excited by it. We're going to talk about tons of positive. Pretty much all of the general negativity about what could or could not be is pretty much out the window right now as far as the conversation piece goes for the rest of the video. We're done. I've said my piece. But I also want us to make sure that when we're looking at this matchup, we're looking at with the eyes of not just this was great that we won this game, but what does this set us up to do in 2026? Not just this season, what does it set us up to do in the new Pac-12 when Boise State needs to establish themselves back nationally, or they're going to slip out of the national conscious. So, overall, though, Maddox Matson in this game, he came ready to play. He didn't show the rust that a lot of people thought that he would, including myself, and he absolutely proved why he is the emotional leader of this team, and he led this program 17-31, 289 yards, 3 touchdowns, rushing, 0 interceptions. Didn't really have any of those near-pick type things that we've seen from Maddox Matson in the past, and a rushing touchdowns for 4 touchdowns overall and 1 offensive MVP as he deserved to do. And a big part of that was a difference in scheme. This wasn't just Maddox Matson coming out and playing really well, which he did. It wasn't just that, though. Boise State didn't, at least for the first half of this game, didn't settle back into the bad habit patterns offensively that we'd seen pretty much this entire season. Boise State came out, yes, first drive didn't pan out. There was a little bit of rust, at least on that very first drive. There was a little bit of rust. Maddox Matson, was high on off target on a quick slant to Penry, and then a blitz forced a quick pass to the tight end when he had a wide open wide receiver coming across the middle. And then he, in the very start of the next drive, throws a ball behind Caples that ends up being ruled incomplete. But if he'd actually put it on him, it would have been completed. But he took a sack. He took a hit. And every player I've ever talked to would agree on this sense, and has pretty much said as much, that when you take that first hit, it wakes you up into the game. It really does. It activates those fight or flight reflexes, and it wakes you up. And Maddox Matson, after that sack on drive number 2, was a completely different quarterback. Very next play, throws a beautiful pass on a tight window. A beautiful pass on a tight window to Penry, who, Penry, by the way, 3 catches, 96 yards, could have had 100-plus yards if not for a poor throw by Maddox Madsen in the second half. But 3 catches for 96 yards. Huge game. Has been an incredible contributor on the back end of the season, replacing injured Ben Ford. What an incredible player to wait his time, to do things the right way, that blue-collar work ethic, to just wait and wait, playing in piecemeal time throughout the seasons until he finally gets his moment to shine. And boy, did he make that time and that moment count, because he was a huge part of Boise State winning this game, sparking the offense in the second half to give Boise State a chance to go down and score again, and being a big part of getting Boise State off to a hot start in this one as well in drive number 2 with a beautiful throw, tight window, Penry ends up running 45 yards, and then Maddox Madsen, injured Maddox Madsen, and it was probably since Kellen Moore, it was probably the slowest run I'd ever seen for a touchdown out of a Boise State quarterback, and you could still tell that he was limping, but Maddox Madsen scramble hopped to a 10-yard plus touchdown run, taking a hit on his way into the end zone. I mean, I was blown away by that. I thought, okay, this is Maddox Madsen. He's back. He's not going to be rusty Madsen in this matchup. He is going to be the Madsen we see, which is the fighter that finds a way to do it no matter what you may think he's going to do. He's going to find a way to fight through, and he did. And that was it from then on. Third drive for Boise State. He has an incredible throw on a big pass to Bates for 30-plus yards, a quick pass to Caples, and then Riley just check down to Riley after Bates isn't open, goes through his reads, does the check down to Riley. Haven't seen that very often from him this year. He hasn't looked to it's been so aggravating. He hasn't looked to that check down. He did today, and Riley runs in for a touchdown. And that's what I'm talking about for this offensive scheme. Again, offensive scheme wasn't just Madsen being good in this game. The offensive scheme we saw in this matchup, at least again in that first half, was the offensive scheme that we've seen since Colorado State, which is why I absolutely believe without a shadow of a doubt that this is not fully Nate Potter's offense. Absolutely believe that. I mean, until Zach Hill leaves his staff and Nate Potter does what we've seen him do this last couple of games, there's nothing that can convince me that this is Nate Potter's offense. After San Diego State lost, I absolutely believe that Spencer Danielson came out and supported Nate Potter, supported his guys. But when he did that, he put whatever happened the rest of the season on him. He took his coach out of the hot seat and put the hot seat potentially onto him. And when that happens, I think Spencer Danielson, who is a coach who trusts his guys, he says, hey, I put you in this position, now you go do the work. I'm not going to micromanage you. I'm going to give you the support you need, but you're going to lead in this element. That's a good leadership technique. However, when your guys aren't living up to the standard that you have for them, or that the fan base or that the team themselves has for them in that position, you have to step in. And I absolutely believe that he stepped in and did some shuffling around in the role and responsibilities in that offensive coordinator room, because the offense we've seen, Colorado State and Utah State, is polar opposite to any offense we saw previously. And that, I think, is absolutely, and if you look at this Boise State offense and compare it to the offenses that Zach Hill ran when he was the offensive coordinator for Boise State, there are a lot of similarities. And I absolutely believe that Zach Hill, I think it shows up today, that Zach Hill has a huge hand in the way that this offense is run. Nate Potter may still be calling the plays, but I think this is Zach Hill's game plan for these matchups. And it's not just Max Cutforth, because other people are saying, well, the offense is just running smoother because it's able to do that because Max Cutforth is maybe a better quarterback. And I don't think that's necessarily 100% true one way or the other. What I do think is that the offense we saw today is the same offense that we ran under Max Cutforth, so it's not just designing an offensive scheme for Max Cutforth. It's designing an offensive scheme that works. This offensive scheme works. Running the ball 47 times, 43 of those up the middle versus Nevada, does not work. Having an offense that your plan is simply, we're going to run it on first down, play action on second down, and then hopefully something else happens on third down, is not an offensive scheme that works. Having your game plan be, we're just going to run it down your throat, and eventually we're going to break through and wear you down in the second half, is not a winning offensive scheme. But having an offensive scheme that says we're going to have a balanced mix of run and pass. 17 passes for Boise State in the first half, 18 runs for Boise State in the first half. We're going to have a balanced scheme. We're going to have a scheme that mixes up what we do on first down. I mean, pretty much every single play so far coming into the Colorado State game for Boise State this entire season, almost every single one of them was just simply a run on first down. Boise State didn't do that for Colorado State and Utah State, and they didn't do it today. They didn't run it every single time on first down, and they didn't just line up and run it. Boise State not just on their passing plays. Boise State's been pretty good on using the shift and motion in their passing plays to create one-on-one matchups for their wide receivers. But on their running plays, Boise State did the window dressing. Everything that I've been calling for and everyone else has been calling for this entire season, they did the window dressing in this matchup. Again, the offense we've seen versus College State and Utah State. What we've typically seen out of Boise State, shifts and motions, lining up in one formation and then shifting into another, maybe lining up in a spread and coming down into heavier set, or vice versa. Boise State is running the quarterback up the middle, and what do? They shift the wide receiver over, they push the tight end out, and then they move the running back, and then Boise State runs it right up the middle. Even for the quarterback run for the first down, that's great. You can absolutely come out and run the ball up the middle. That's part of football, is establishing the run, especially in the center of the line, so that you can open up opportunities on the outside, so you can suck the defense down and open up opportunities in the passing game. I'm not saying you don't run the ball up the middle, but you don't just line up and run it up the middle every single time. You have to give them something else to look at, and that's what's made Boise State offenses in the past great, is because they do what you would expect a normal offense to do, but they present it to you in a way that you don't know what's coming. And that is what we started seeing out of this Boise State team the last couple of games, and it was on full display today. Not just that. I mean, not just that in that running aspect, but just some of these play calls were absolutely brilliant. And I think that is where Potter shines, is when you have a game plan that works, that he's then able to implement his ideas. Because I think he is a very, very intelligent person. I think that he has a really great brain, which I've said we need his brain on this team. He's a really great brain for creating complex plays that are really exciting to watch and have huge potential. I just don't think that he's great at coming up with a game plan overall strategically to come up against the other team. Now, when you have a good game plan strategist like Zach Hill, and then you have someone who's good at calling individual plays within that game plan, I think that works. And I will modify a position that I stated previously into this video. I said that Nate Potter needs to be fired, not necessarily kicked off of this team. I think he'd be great as offensive line coach again, and I love him as a contributor to this offense, but not as the primary responsibility. I will make a modification to that. If Boise State keeps the same scheme that they've had the last 3 games, which is what I believe is Zach Hill actually designing the overall greater game plan and then Nate Potter executing that. If Boise State keeps that same philosophy between those two the rest into next year, I think this can be a successful duo. I think Boise State has shown the last 3 games that Nate Potter, in whatever format has been created for him, whatever that is, can be successful for Boise State. And so, again, I didn't want to have to call for Nate Potter to be fired. I wanted him to be part of this program. He's an incredible former player for Boise State as a former offensive lineman, part of the golden era, the Kellen Moore era of Boise State. You never want to have to call for someone in the family to have to be removed from their position, but sometimes you have to make the tough decisions, which is what I was putting on Spencer Danielson. Sometimes you have to make the tough decisions for the betterment of the team, and I think he did that. I think he did that in his way. He didn't make a full disruption. He still kept the personal relationship, but he made enough of a change to help that person be successful in their role. And I think that is what we've seen. And so if Nate Potter is still the offensive coordinator in 2026, I'm not going to say that's going to doom the season, like maybe could have been the case coming into this. I think Boise State can still be successful in 2026 with the current scheme because it's working. Nate Potter is still calling plays. You can see him up in the play booth, unless he's just an incredible actor. I mean, that is just going way to conspiracy theory route at that point. That's not what's happening. He's clearly still calling the plays on this offense. I just think that there are other minds that are being given an opportunity to also have a bigger say in how this offensive scheme is developed. And so, regardless of what is happening, Boise State's offense is working now, which is also working regardless of who is lining up at quarterback. Boise State finally has an offense that isn't just designed from one player. And not that the offense we had coming into Utah State was a working offense designed for Max Matson, but I think it was an offense that was maybe coordinated to the strengths of what they thought the team was. Regardless of what it was designed for, it didn't work, but Boise State does have an offense that will work now. Now, there are some habit patterns they have to get out of. First half, Boise State in this game, they come in. I don't think that they thought that they were going to be as successful as they were. And so they came out absolutely ready to play. Absolutely ready to play. They came out creatively. Those first 3 touchdown drives for Boise State had a ton of window dressing, creativity, and balance. Now, Boise State gets out to a big lead. They weren't expecting it. They came to play to win, not to play just not to lose like we have seen a lot of games. They came as the underdog in this matchup, and they performed like one, jumping out to a huge lead. Then I think Boise State at that point said, whoa, we're winning this. Let's not lose it. And I think that's when the mentality switched to what we've seen for a large part of the season. Now, I will say Boise State was still decently aggressive in the second half, going for it on fourth down and creative plays, but they saved their aggression and creativity for the key moments. In the first half, Boise State was creative on second down. They were creative on first down. They had balance and mix on every single play that Boise State had, and including some absolutely brilliant play calls. Drive number 6 for Boise State. They fake the handoff to the running back. Then they fake the pitch back to the wide receiver on the wide receiver sweep. And then they throw back to the left to the running back they faked it to in the first place, Malik Sherrod, for a running back screen. He broke a tackle and then just exploded for a 40-yard touchdown. It was brilliant. I rewound and watched that play 3 times. One of the best plays I've seen this season. And that wasn't the only one. The other one that they did was incredible was on drive number 4, their third touchdown of the game. And they had 3 times motion. They had the tight end shift in, then they had the tight end shift back out, so it indicates that the play is rolling right. And then Caples shifts over and goes on an out route for a quick. The whole defense expects the play to go, and I think he was probably the primary receiver. I think they were trying to create a one-on-one matchup. He's not open. But what all of that did, all that shifting in motion did, is it pushed all the defensive eyes to the right side of the field, or left side defensively, right side of the field for Boise State. And Banks goes and stands in the corner of the end zone, with the closest person being the cameraman to him, and Max Madsen hits him for a wide open touchdown. That is the kind of creativity and brilliance that Boise State was showing in this. Incredible individual, brilliant play calls that I think is Nate Potter's influence coming through. He can design a great play, and then the overall great scheme, which I think is Zach Hill's influence. Together, they're working as an incredible team right now, and that's what we need to see going into 2026. And so I'm going to reverse the position. I'm not a person that says, hey, once something has happened, there's no way to ever come back from it. I believe in redemption, and I believe that you can also not necessarily be wrong, because if Boise State continued the reasons that I said in the first place, is that Nate Potter needed to be fired, I was right in that moment for exactly the offense that Boise State was showing they could perform. But Boise State made the changes, and once you've made the changes and prove that you can work off of them, you deserve second chances. And Boise State made all the changes that I called for them to make. They moved around the scheme, and it's working now. And so Boise State is showing that there was another alternative. The other alternative being Nate Potter didn't need to be fired, but there did need to be a change in how Boise State's offensive scheme worked and the minds behind it. And I think, again, I don't have any evidence per se. I don't have anybody that's told me this is what happened. I don't have an inside source that says this is exactly what happened. But my analysis based on the facts we have presented, which is Boise State had one team that looked completely different for 90% of the season, then they have one team that looks completely different for another 90 for the last 3 games of the season. There's got to be a major reason for that. When you look at the similarities in the scheme to what we've seen previously from Zach Hill, it all comes together logically to make sense. The facts are presenting that this is probably what has happened. But again, I'm not saying that anyone who's told me this is exactly what has happened, but I would be massively shocked if this is not exactly what Boise State is doing, and it's working. And Boise State's offense did incredible things the first half. Now again, second half, all this creativity, great plays, balance and mix every single play. Second half for Boise State, in this game, they had 460 yards of offense, 288 of those coming in the first half. So 288 yards of offense in the first half, about 180 or so yards of offense in the second half for Boise State. And 40-ish of that coming on just a really, really great play by Penry to make a catch, not a great throw, a catch on not a great throw, and then just break it wide open to get almost all the way down to the end zone. So Boise had a couple of big breakaway plays, but their offense overall stalled out, and you could see that in the amount of points that Boise State ended up putting up in the second half. 28 points in the first half, 10 points in the second half, giving UNLV an opportunity to come back in this game. Boise State had a 3-score lead at one point in this game, and then UNLV pulled this to a 1-score lead before Boise State finally managed to pull away with this. Now the first half for Boise State, they had 1 punt, 4 touchdowns, two punts, 4 touchdowns, and then simply a clock expiring at the end of the first half, which we'll talk about that in a moment. Second half for Boise State, they had 1 touchdown, 1 field goal, and turnover and downs and 2 punts. So very much a different offensive performance. Again, Boise State wasn't completely playing not to lose in the second half. Certainly not doing that. They were very much more on the lines of, we're still going to be aggressive. They're going for it on fourth downs. And brilliant play call. Caples just tripped on the turf. Otherwise, that would have been a touchdown in the first drive. They had some really nice third down plays. But what they were doing in the second half is what we've been seeing them do pretty much this whole season coming into Colorado State, which is they just ran and ran and ran, and then when that didn't work, then they pulled the creativity out. In the first drive for Boise State, 2 runs up the middle, doesn't really do much for them. They get one nice, decent carry for about 4 yards, and then nothing on the second, and then they have a beautiful play to Sherrod in the flat, runs it up for 20 yards after that. And then second, Boise State runs it twice. It's the exact same play. The first run is decent for 6 yards. And then they run the exact same play, exact same formation. Don't do anything to shift or give anything different for UNLV to look at. Run the exact same play on second down for nothing, of course. Then Wagner makes a really great pass on a tight end throw coming across the middle, right to left, and he's open. And Boise State throws a really, really nice play, but a great play design, but on third down. See what Boise State did in the second half is they went back to the little half patterns. And there was nothing that justified them doing that. Now, if Boise State's coming in the second half, they have all the momentum on their side, the 28-point lead or something like that, then sure, yeah, I'm totally fine with starting to just burn clock at that point. Like the last drive for Boise State. I don't have anything wrong with Boise State on the very last drive. They take the ball with 7 minutes left, and they just run and run and run. I don't have any problem with that. I mean, it's situation dependent. That's totally fine. But that is not the situation Boise State found themselves in. Boise State found themselves in a situation where they let a 3-score lead deteriorate into UNLV scoring back-to-back touchdowns in their last drives with all the momentum and energy on their side and coming out fired up and ready to try and win this thing in the second half. That's UNLV's perspective. That is the situation Boise State had, trying to regain that momentum coming in the second half. And on top of that, you could tell that Boise State was going to do this in the second half because of how they ended the first half. The way Boise State ended the first half is they got the ball back with 49 seconds. Okay, I don't need a team with 49 seconds to go down and risk everything and go down and score, especially when you have a 2-score lead. Now, if you're down by 2 scores, then yes, you need to go and be more aggressive. But I'm okay with a team taking a ball to half in the first half if you only have 49 seconds. But what I'm not okay with is a team with 2 timeouts who's been running the ball effectively and completing short passes effectively, simply giving up when they have every opportunity. I'm not saying you need to go risk everything. I'm not saying you need to run it up tempo every single play and you need to throw it deep and you need to risk throwing into double coverage because, the risks be darned, you're gonna go and score. I'm not saying you have to do that, but Boise State, they open up the first half, their final drive of the first half, 49 seconds left, 2 runs for first down. They get back up first, really quick back to the line, they take a shot. They try to take a shot, nothing is open. They check it down, and then they just let the clock run out. They have 18 seconds left, and they're right around midfield. They're at like the 45-ish yard line. So at the 40, I mean, yeah, if you're back at your 20 and you've done this, okay, take it to half. But you're at the 40-ish, 45-yard line. You're 20 or so yards away from being in a field goal shot opportunity. Boise State took a 50-yard field goal at the end of the second half in similar, maybe worse weather conditions than what we saw in the first half, okay? So that is not the consideration. Boise State, if you trust your kicker in that circumstance to take that field goal, you should trust them to do it in this circumstance, okay? Boise State just completes a pass to the tight end. It's now third down, I think, second or third down and short. I think second down for Boise State. Third down and about 3 or 4 yards, okay? Third down about 3 or 4 yards. You're at midfield, so you're probably going to get that first down. And if you don't get that first down, UNLV's got, I think, 1 timeout left at this point. You get the ball back with like 10 seconds. You can punt it away from midfield, pin them. The odds of them coming back and scoring on you are just so minimal. You could kick it out the back of the end zone, and then they ought to complete a Hail Mary. The percentage odds of you completing that first down and having a chance to go score are way higher than UNLV, who has all this momentum on their side right now anyway. You need to try and take some of that back, right? The odds of you being able to go out and score are so much higher than them going to be able to go down and score on you. Statistically, you should be taking every opportunity you get in that context circumstance when you're sitting at midfield. And Boise State, with 2 timeouts, takes both timeouts to halftime, lets 18 seconds just tick off the clock, and then takes it. Doesn't make any sense in that circumstance, unless your thought process is, okay, we came out aggressive, and we're here. Now let's coast. And that seemed to be the mindset for Boise State. And that is the issue. That's the biggest issue I have for Boise State that, again, we then ended up seeing in the second half. That's why Boise State was less effective. Now, UNLV, obviously, they're going to make their adjustments in their schemes, and you've got to make your adjustments to match what they're trying to give you. And so it's not the exact same team you saw in the first half, and they're going to be more aggressive because they know that everything now is on the line. And so there's other reasons that Boise State's not as successful. But the biggest reason they're not as successful is because the offense we saw in the second half was not the offense we saw in the first half. It was not the up-tempo, creative, balanced scheme that we saw out of Boise State in the first half. It was Boise State being creative when they absolutely had to, but trying to throttle back and control clock and grind it out that allowed the UNLV to have a chance to come back in this game. And if UNLV had been a little more aggressive on their side of things or been a little bit more effective, and Calandra missed a wide open receiver on a third down that could have been for a lot more yards and maybe a touchdown too, missed him, and they ended up punting on a 4th and 2. That's the kind of circumstance. UNLV did a lot of things to hurt themselves in the second half. I'm not saying it's like Nevada where, Boise State didn't win the game, Nevada lost it. Boise State did everything they needed to win this game, but they were helped out in the second half by UNLV not being as effective in the second half as they had been in the first half. UNLV overall in this matchup, and big shout out to Boise State's defense doing a great job of adapting. But when you're talking about a Boise State offensive decision making, they had to lean on their defense to win this game in the second half because they chose to be more conservative. Again, we'll talk about the defense here in a moment, but just kind of set the stage. UNLV in this game, 270 yards in the first half, 14 points. In the second half, they finished the game with 409 yards and only 7 points. So they only had 139 yards. They had 270 yards in the first half, only had 139 yards in the second half. The defense did a lot to step up and win this matchup, but they had to because Boise State did what we've seen them do pretty much the entire season. They did that offense in the second half. And that is what scares me the most, is because Boise State has this potential to do great things like we saw offensively, Colorado State, Utah State, and then the first half of this game. But they also have the mindset potential to revert back to the same things that lost us the game versus USF, that put Boise State in a position that was really hard to win the game versus Notre Dame, where you had to do some really scary things that ended up in a lot of interceptions, or put you in a situation where you lost Fresno State and lost San Diego State. The reason Boise State lost those two games wasn't just because they didn't have a good, solid, ready-to-go quarterback in the room in the situation at the time. It was also because of all the offensive scheme issues that I had identified versus Nevada that they should have lost that game too. And so that scares me, that Boise State is still capable of doing that if the circumstance puts them into that position. That there are situations that they mentally can revert back to that. But 2026 Boise State to be the program that I believe that they can be, for Boise State to be that program, they have to completely expunge that entire thought process, because it's not Boise State. That mentality of we're going to coast and we're going to play not to lose is not what Boise State is built on. It's not what blue collar stands for. Boise State, blue collar, you work like the clock is 0-0 all the way to the end. You don't let anybody work harder than you, and it's that 2% better. That's what made those Boise State teams so great, is that they never stopped trying, even in game, never stopped trying to get a little bit better, and good enough was never good enough. You wanted to be perfect, you strove for excellence, and you pushed for not just winning, but dominating. That is what those Boise State teams did. That's what Boise State is. And that's what we saw in the first half. But the second half for Boise State causes for concern when you're talking about the culture, mental culture of a program and what is still a potential that they could show in 2026. So, a lot of things to be excited about, especially that first half for Boise State. Came back, did what they needed to win this game. But again, whether it was a Maddox Madsen just showing the signs of the fatigue from being out for so long, or the effects of taking hits. I mean, the first hit wakes you up, but eventually those hits come back to you, especially when you're coming off of an injury with the effects of so whether it was a stamina issue or if it was just simply body capability with the hits that he's taken and the injury that he's clearly still dealing with, you could clearly see him limping in the first half. You certainly could see him limping in the second half. So whether that was the case or it was the overall offensive scheme, which, regardless of Max Madsen's performance, and he didn't play as well in the second half, but regardless of Max Madsen's performance, Boise State did not set him up for success in the second half by going back to a more conservative play calling until they absolutely needed to on key fourth or third downs. So whatever those reasons were, this Boise State offense in the second half did enough to win, but also did enough to plant some scary seeds for what could still be a problem for Boise State in 2026. So I'm excited about what we saw out of this team and their potential. I'm excited that we saw that Maddox Matson can be a good quarterback for Boise State, even through injury, and actually run an offense that is explosive and exciting. And that is the biggest takeaway from all of this, is that if Maddox Matson wins or is appointed to the starting quarterback in 2026, and I hope it's a battle that he could win, and I'm not saying that he's absolutely not going to be a starter in 2026 if there's an open battle. I think Maddox Matson could win that, but I want the best quarterback in that position. The only way you're going to see that is through an open battle. But regardless, if Maddox Matson wins that quarterback battle, or if he's appointed to it and there is no quarterback battle, Boise State fans can take some heart that the offense has the potential to still be explosive and exciting with Maddox Matson at the helm and no Ashton Jeanty. Because that's what we saw. This offense can be balanced and explosive and exciting, and the quick passing game can still be a factor. Now, I don't think it was as effective as it was Max Cupforth. I think the height is a bit of a impactor for that quick passing game. I think that's part of the reason that those slants and passes across the middle were not accurate, just because Max Matson is having to do some different things platform-wise to get those balls there. So I think that is an impactor. But regardless, Boise State can run this offensive scheme that has worked for Max Cupforth, for Colorado State and Utah State. It can work for Max Matson. If we run this offensive scheme, not only will we be Boise State again as far as the exciting content, not football games that even when you win, you're just sitting there. I mean, as a boy, I can imagine why you would watch the team that we saw, even when they were winning, as a non-Boise State fan, because even when they were winning, that offense was just so mediocre and boring. And so not only are we a team that other people want to watch, that can be exciting, that can be a television draw, but at the same time, we can be a Boise State program that can go out and beat anybody. Not that we will beat anybody. There's other factors that still have to come into play. And at the end of the day, it's always going to be a battle. I'm not going to say that this offense is 100% set to beat any program that he plays, but it is the type of offense that will work against any type of defense and will give Boise State a chance to be a contender again on the national stage. And so I'm excited. The biggest takeaway from all of this is that the offense was not boring and mediocre and lethargic because of Maddox Matson. It was that because of poor offensive game planning by Nate Potter that, however it's happened, has been corrected. Whereas Nate Potter had a one-on-one Spencer Danielson discussion and a come to Jesus revival moment and decided to completely reverse his entire personality and game planning thought process. And if that's the case, or if it's the more simple, logical step that Zach Hill took a heavier hand in this offense, regardless of what happened, Boise State has an offense that can be successful next year, regardless of who's at quarterback. And that is the most exciting thing coming out of this. So for Boise State's offense in this overall, Dylan Riley, great game for him. Not 100 yards, but 75 yards of rushing, also receiving touchdown. Sire Gaines, who's been banged up coming into the season, coming back from an injury, never really regained his true form that we saw potential of in 2024. But we did see flashes, and we saw more and more flashes as the season went on, and I think we're starting to see what fully healthy Sire Gaines can do, which includes not just 64 yards and a touchdown, but one almost Ashton Jeanty-esque run where he ran through 7 tackles. 7, including 2 of them where he ran through double tackles twice on the same run, double tackles at the same time. He is really heating up now. He'll be exciting in the bowl game, but more than that, if we can keep him and Dylan Riley going into 2026, what an offense we're going to have with those two healthy in the backfield. It's going to be, unstoppable level of offense. Hopefully not such an offense that you just focus in on that as offensive coordinator, Nate Potter. You still have to think about everything else, but that combined in the scheme that we see right now for Boise State, an unstoppable offensive potential with Sire Gaines and Dylan Riley. Super, super exciting to see them. Bates still started to step up again. He's struggled with drops the last few games, but in the weather and the elements, he didn't today. 65 yards and a touchdown on Lee Sherrod. And then Caples, obviously, outside the trip, he actually played really, really well and had a couple of plays that ended up getting reversed on him that were just, he went down and did his best on bad throws in those situations from Max Matson. Not that every throw from Max Matson was a bad pass. He had some good moments here and there. But he could have had a couple more catches if they weren't reversed. It was really close, kind of touch and go, whether or not they were catches or not. And then Quentin Brown still getting involved in this game. Couple of sweep rushes for him. Exciting potential to see what he can do. So excited out of this Boise State offense. Some really great players stepping up, including some young guys like Bates and Quentin Brown that will be back next year. Some faces that are going to be moving on, like Caples and Chase Penry. But overall, this Boise State offense, I was happy by what I saw from them. I'm going to give it a solid A- performance. I think that second half and just kind of the thought process changed for the offensive staff a little bit. It hurts that overall grade. But overall, for Boise State in this offense, despite the weather, despite the rain, despite the cold, despite the elements, despite Max Madsen coming back from injury, to do what Boise State did in this game offensively when it mattered at the biggest stage for them so far. I mean, Notre Dame, you could argue, is a little bigger stage, but bigger is meaning. As a trophy that's had so much more meaning and context behind it when you talk about what this symbolizes for 2026. Boise State to show up the way they did offensively, absolutely critical to this win, and a huge shout out to the team to battle through what they did and to rally and finish the season so strong. And that really goes to the offense. Incredible game overall for them, especially when you consider that first half. First half's A+, second half's closer to like a B, B-. Overall, we can give it a solid A- for this matchup. Now, defensively for Boise State, talking about the offense needing to rally back. Defense this whole season has been consistently strong. Boise State, this team has reminded me a little bit of 2012. Now, obviously, that's a better team going, overall, winning so many more games, only losing the 2 games that season. Winning, I think they finished with 12-2 or 11-2 that year. Yeah, because they didn't have Mountain West Championship at that point. So finishing 11-2 with a bowl game win against Washington, which now Boise State has a chance to kind of repeat that cycle with a chance to go play Washington in their bowl game this year. This team has reminded me so much of that 2012 program. Being a team that has some inconsistencies at offense and just doesn't have that same shock value that they saw from the years before, but defensively being a program that can hang their hat on that and still go out and win games and put the offense in position to go out and score and be able to win in the end. And so defensively for Boise State, they've been so consistent throughout the year. They have struggled in some areas. The middle of the line linebacker core has been a little bit of a question mark, but the secondary for Boise State and the defense as a whole has been so fantastic, and that continued in this game. Just shutting UNLV down early in this matchup allowed Boise State to build up that huge lead that they could then coast off of for the rest of the game. And big part of that came back to their defense, starting right off the bat with Max Stiege. Do not piss off the Germans. Definitely don't do it. And UNLV found out that they are going to pay the price for the referee mishaps that happened last week. Obviously, Stiege getting thrown out of that game. You know that he was fired up to come into this game with a mentality to make somebody pay. And he found his target with Jaden Thomas on the very first play of the game. I love that. Stiege completely unjustified to be thrown out of the matchup last week, but he came and made a huge impact in this game. Overall, Stiege in this matchup had 4 tackles and 2 tackles for loss, and he started off with a huge negative 4-yard loss on Jaden Thomas, which just set the whole stage for the entire game from then on out. That drive, Boise State, negative 4-yard loss in Jaden Thomas. Bowen Phelps ends up forcing a fumble that Benefield then recovers, and fumble turnover on the very first drive. Now, after Boise State's offense hasn't been able to get going, the defense sets the tone like they have pretty much all season long. Max Madsen's the emotional leader for this team as an individual, but the defense has been the emotional surcharge, the foundational basis emotionally of this entire program this season, and they established that momentum for Boise State that they were then able to ride off of offensively. And Boise State ended up then forcing a punt, a missed field goal, and then 2 more punts before UNLV had a chance to get into this game, including some great individual stand-up performances. Mickey going and stripping a catch through a receiver who had an opportunity to make that catch and stripping the ball out of his hands before he could make it. Really great coverage by Irby on a 3rd and 10 that then forced the missed field goal. Another great defensive play by Mickey, not allowing a block by a receiver on a sweep and then making the key tackle on a 3rd down. Mickey played really well in this game. Mickey, the 3 players that I was most impressed by overall, at least in the secondary for this team in this matchup, were Mickey, Smith, and then overall Benefield, who won Defensive Player of the Game. Smith for me, Sherrod Smith, he showed up on drive number 5, breaking up a pass. Such a young player to have that technique already down right now, and he's going to get bigger, stronger, and smarter coming into next season. he is going to be a first-team Pac-12. Remember the name of Sherrod Smith, because he is going to be not just, assuming that he stays at Boise State, because you never can tell. I know transfer portal things how they happen, but if he can stay with Boise State, he's not only going to be a first-team guy defensively in the Pac-12, he's going to be one of those defenders that we remember, like we are going to remember Benefield, like we think back and remember, JL Skinner and all these guys going back. He's going to be one of those players for Boise State that I think is going to be one of the leaders for this team defensively in 2026. So impressed by him in this game. He continued his strong performance last week where he had 7 tackles, career high for him versus Utah State. Another strong performance, 4 tackles, and led the team in passes defended, including this one on drive number 5. And yeah, UNLV got their feet under him. I don't think it was a situation of Boise State emotionally being taken out of this game. I don't think it was a case of them just kind of allowing UNLV to come back into it. I think it was just UNLV is a good offense. Their defense sucks, but offensively they're a good program, and eventually they're going to get a way to beat you a couple of times. And that's what happened at the end of the first half. UNLV, feeling the pressure, feeling the pinch, absolutely had to dial in, and they ended up breaking a couple of long runs. It wasn't like they were just going down every single play and just driving down Boise State, getting lucky on a couple of big plays, being able to find a way to beat the man one-on-one in front of them. Again, it's a good offense. Eventually, they're going to find a way to break through, and they did get 2 touchdowns to end that half. They have the momentum, okay? They haven't played great for, 5 drives prior, but the last 2 drives, they figure out a way. Again, huge runs. Lee has a 20-yard run. Zion Washington misses a tackle, and then Lee breaks out again for a 15-yard run. Smith ends up dragging him down for a good tackle once he gets to his level, and then the quarterback ends up running it in for a touchdown. And Calandria is an incredible quarterback, probably one of the better quarterbacks Boise State has seen this entire season. And obviously Notre Dame's quarterback is better, but they're one of the better quarterbacks Boise State's seen this entire season. He's an incredible athlete overall. He did take a pretty significant hit near the goal line. I think it was on this final drive of the first half. Maybe it was early in the second half. Ended up impacting his play style a little bit. I think maybe if he doesn't take that hit, he's a little bit more of a lethal threat in the second half, and maybe that changes things with how Boise ended up playing that game in the second half. I think that was a factor for him, but he played really, really well. 225 yards at a touchdown, no picks. Then he also rushed for 66 yards at a touchdown, and most of that rushing coming in the first half. Again, I think that if he hadn't taken that hit, I think that he could have had like 100+ yards rushing and maybe been a factor in giving UNLV a chance to lead an upset attempt in the second half. So I think him getting banged up a little bit was a bit of a factor in this one. But regardless, Boise State does give up 2 back-to-back drives to end the the first half. But the thing that I have just been the most respectful of Chenander and his ability is his ability to adjust. His adjustments are elite. He is an adjustment wizard, and he absolutely, every single game this season, not that they've won every one, but every single game this season, he has made the adjustments needed, not just throughout the season, but in game, specifically coming out of half, to find a way for Boise State to shut down the team. And this second half defense, the defense overall for Boise State is good, but their second half defense is absolutely elite. Now, defensively, Boise State overall is one of the top defenses in the country. I think a lot of people forget that about this Boise State team, that they're actually a really, really, they're a top 40 defense in the country, and their passing defense is like top 15 in the country. I think they're 11th overall. But for Boise State overall, defensively, their adjustments in the second half have been absolutely elite, and it was no exception. 14 points allowed. They're getting momentum in the first half. Second half, only 7 points allowed, and like I said, it's about 130 yards overall for offense. And they allowed 156 yards rushing in the first half. They only allowed not even 30 yards rushing, 28 yards rushing in the second half. That's it. The quarterback's running all over them. Running backs were starting to find opportunity at the end of that first half to break through. They shut them down. In the second half. So they allowed about 100 yards passing. UNLV's getting desperate, allowed about 100 yards passing, but only 1 touchdown. So they allow some big passes, but it's bend but don't break, and they don't end up going any further. Steege starts out the second half the same way he started out the first half, with a huge tackle for loss on Jaden Thomas, and then Jane Virgin Morgan gets a sack on that first drive. Yeah, they go down, they score a touchdown on their drive number 2, but then drive number 3 and 4 are both punts, and then drive number 5 ends up finishing out the game with UNLV taking a sack and then time expiring, and they lose that matchup. So Boise State in this game defensively really, really impressed, continuing to be impressed. Linebackers stepping up a little bit. There are some negatives, but Boise State's linebackers struggle in coverage. They're really, really good when it comes to getting after the quarterback. And they're decent at stopping the run. Now, if they get to that second level and there's an open field type opportunity, they're not so strong at. We did see UNLV's running backs finding ways to, or their wide receivers in space finding ways to run away from specifically Notriani, unfortunately. But Boise State's linebackers really good when it comes to forcing pressure. Notriani had a big sack in this one. I forget which drive exactly it was, if I could find it here. Negative 12-yard sack on drive number 4. He and Phelps had just blown up a wide receiver sweep, and then the very next play, Notriani comes and makes a huge sack in the backfield. So there are some things that need to be worked on. Their pass coverage, there were some good moments, and Notriani had a nice pass defense early in the first half that ended up leading to a good Irby defensive play on third down and ended up becoming a punt. So that, there are some good moments, but if you're talking about a trend item, if we do need to identify some negatives, you're talking about a trend item that needs to be addressed. It's the pass coverage for these linebackers. UNLV was able to complete a 4th down completion, which I believe that, 4th and 6, which allowed them to get that touchdown on drive number 2, and it was on Irby, and it ended up being about a 25-yard play. So, yes, there are still some issues when it comes to pass coverage, but when it comes to aggression, when it comes to plays in the backfield, when it comes to gang tackling, so not having to make those tackles in the open space, really solid performances from these linebackers. And I think that coverage skills is something you can work on a little bit when it comes to at least maybe scheme-wise to maybe make up for it, or just simply working on it over the offseason. So I'm not overly concerned, but they were a factor in this matchup, but didn't end up being crucial in the game. And I was impressed overall by the performance of Irby and Phelps as well. I mean, Bowen Phelps has just, former walk-on himself, incredible performance this season, stepping up. Boise State needed linebackers to step up. They're missing, I think, that Simpson was really that do-it-all linebacker, obviously, going to North Carolina, getting that huge NIL kind of thing. He was that do-it-all linebacker that was really good in coverage and also stepping up, and he and Notriani were a really good combo together. Phelps obviously isn't that same level as Simpson, but he's done an incredible job stepping up. I think it has exposed a little bit Notriani's pass coverage issues, but overall, seeing what Notriani and Phelps have done together, working just ultimate blue-collar mentality from both of those guys. And then Phelps, today, not only did he have 7 tackles and a tackle for loss, but he also was the player that forced the fumble on the very first drive that Benefield ended up being able to recover. Just a no-quit mentality, very Wimpy-esque mentality out of Phelps. I love seeing it. Riley Wimpy, not Wimp, but Wimpy, Riley Wimpy mentality out of Bowen Phelps. And I was really impressed by what I saw out of him and the defense overall in this matchup. And so very strong. I thought defensive performance overall, only allowing 21 points out of a UNLV team that certainly is capable of scoring a lot more than that. Really strong performance, I thought, for this Boise State defense overall, and was a huge factor in not only allowing Boise State to get out to a big lead in the first half offensively, while Max Matson was still kind of riding off of that adrenaline early on in this game, but then also being a factor in making up for some offensive issues in the second half to allow Boise State to coast and win this game in the second half. So overall, for Boise State in this game, I'm going to give their defense overall a solid A performance as well. So A- for the offense, and then an A overall for this Boise State defense. Last but not least, certainly not least, a unit that has been an issue for Boise State this season. Not one that has contributed a ton to winning every game, but has been a factor in holding Boise State back so far this season. Their special teams, and it's one of those areas where you're talking about coaching that has been under a lot of scrutiny. And Stacey Collins, and he's associate head coach and getting paid a lot of money, and Boise State special teams over the last 2 years have not been very good, and it's continued into this season. And again, not a position I'm calling for termination at this point, and I'm not at that level. And I do think that Stacey Collins does a great job of just one-on-one coaching these guys. I mean, you can see him on the sideline when he kind of is that counterbalance to Spencer Danielson, who's that very like positive emotions kind of guy. And Stacey Collins kind of that opposite level where he's kind of yelling at them, but it's good. You need that mix of both, and you can tell he really does care about each and every one of these players. I mean, every coach on this roster does, and you can tell that Stacey Collins does as well. And I would love for him to turn things around and stay as part of this program, because he did some great things here previously. And again, I think you see him. When I was at the Fresno State game, and Boise State was doing poorly in that matchup, and I think they just allowed a blocked field goal. And Stacey Collins was out there with his guys that have been the center of that line, getting down. They were down in their stance, and he was pushing on them, and he was talking them through, and he was showing, and you could tell the respect the players have for them. I would love for him to turn things around and be able, but I think that this next season is that prove it year for him. I think the seat is definitely hot if we see special teams performances like we have, but a game like today helps. A game like today helps a lot. Not just giving you something you can build on for 2026, but also shows that you have the ability to coach that improvement into the team, because this special teams unit did so well. Not only did the specialists, the individuals that you look to, the field goal kicker and the punter, have great games. Colton Boomer kicked a 50-yard field goal. Oscar Doyle, he was 4 for 40.3-yard average, 2 inside the 20. But not just that. Not just were the individual players great in this matchup, but the scheme of the team overall was strong. The strongest performance, I think, overall for special teams that we've seen this entire season. Boise State has struggled to get to down punts. The punting itself has been good, but downing the punts has been a little bit of a struggle, even from good players. Like Dylan Riley last week had a punt that he could have stopped at about the 2 or 3 yard line. I think if he doesn't touch it, it might actually go out at the 2 or 3. Tries to make the play to down it, and it ends up going into the end zone. Not this week. Boise State did a great job of downing the punts, including, and this is a guy you won't have heard called his name. I think I've called his name one time this season. You won't have heard his name called very much, but Josiah Allen's number 33 goes down and catches the punt at the 11-yard line the 5, catches the punt at the 5-yard line to down UNLV at the 5-yard, and that was a huge factor in that drive. Not only was Boise State doing a great job of punt and kick return, punt return coverage as a unit and getting these punts down, at the same time, their actual return was showing potential. Kick returns were still not, anything huge, but not any bad losses, right around 20 to 25 yards. It's fine. But the punt returns for Boise State, they actually had 2 big punt returns in this game. It had 1 punt return from Malik Sherrod in the first half for 17 yards, and in the second half, he would have had about a 25-ish yard punt return, if not for some blocking the back holding, which happens on a lot of these punt returns. We're not going to blame the unit specifically for that. But they were actually showing that potential, the potential to actually have solid returns, which we've not really seen all year now. There was one negative. Very first punt, Sherrod bobbles the punt, almost turns it over, but he didn't. He recovered, he got it back, and he didn't let that confidence shake him. He didn't let that be a confidence shake that stopped him from being effective. He was more aggressive, if anything else. The rest of the game didn't have another bobble, didn't have another muff, and was also explosive in the punt return the rest of the game. Boise State's punt returns, punting, kicking, all of it. And Colton Boomer going down and making a tackle on a kick return that was one kind of busted play, allowed about a 40-yard kick return, but then the kicker comes down and makes a huge tackle. I mean, there's another player already making the tackle at the time, but Colton Boomer came and put his shoulder into him. And I love it. I love it when you see a kicker come down and get involved in the sport of football, making those hits as well. So not a absolutely perfect performance, couple of mistakes here and there. Obviously the holding on the 1 punt return that would have been a big play for Boise State that didn't need, but it would have been entertaining. Was entertaining to watch, and would have been big kind of emotional morale boost, at least for Sherrod. Didn't end up impacting the game negatively overall. It was one long return that, obviously, like I said, Colton Boomer was a factor in being able to stop, and a bobble at the beginning. But overall, for Boise State in this special teams performance, very, very, very strong. I think they're best of the entire season. It's not A+, because, again, a couple mistakes, but it is a solid A overall, and I couldn't be more proud. And that kind of brings us to the final point here as we review my 3 keys to the game. I could not be more proud of this Boise State team, the adversity that they've had to push through, not just from losses, but physical adversity, losing players, the cultural adversity, players getting kicked off of the team, to rally back the way that this team has, and despite all the outside factors and the negativity that has been justified, but still to rally back from all of that, to push through all of that, and finish this season the way they did, because that Boise State team in that championship game looked like any other Boise State team in a Mountain West championship game. You could have attached any record to that Boise State team, and I think most people would have believed it. And overall, margin-wise, it's a bigger win than what we had last year. It was 21-7. We still had Ashton Genting. So Boise State overall in this game looked like Boise State. There's still some issues that I wanted to identify to make sure that it's a factor for consideration when going into 2026, because those cannot follow us into the Pac-12. But this Boise State team has not looked for wide segments of this season like Boise State, but they did tonight, and they did the last 3 games, and Boise State finished this season strong. That is what matters most. Now you want to play strong in the beginning, you want to play strong in the middle, so that you can go play for more things in the back end, right? But at the end of the day, regardless of how things pan out, the ability, the cultural fortitude, mental fortitude, and cultural strength as a whole to be able to finish the season the right way and finish as champions, that means something, regardless of what the other record is and the other context. To finish as champions is an incredible achievement for this program and speaks volumes to these players being able to step up, and the energy and passion that went away for a little bit of the season, that is all back, and that fire and energy, and it feels like 2023. And when I talk to those players that came out of 2023 into 2024, when I talked to Tune, when I talked to Crow, when I talked to those guys about what inspired you in 2024, they said it was that 2023 moment, the team rallying together as a team to finish the season strong and stand up for what is the standard of this program, and to put themselves in a position where they have a platform of a brotherhood mentality, which has always been what defines the Boise State program. They have a platform and a base of shared adversity that they've gone through that then they can ride off of into what we saw in 2024. And that, I think, is what we're going to see in 2026. I'm not necessarily predicting Boise State's going to go undefeated and get into the playoffs right now. I mean, there's a lot of things we need to think about and look about and schedule. Certain analysis needs to happen. When you're talking about a mentality for this program, when you talk about the 2006 team coming through the 2005 season, the adversity that was, and then the mentality of that program to finish. And yeah, they didn't finish the bowl game the way they wanted to, but the way that they finished that season and then built themselves into 2006 and afterwards, that is what this team feels like right now. They're going through that, they're building through, that mentality is showing through in this program. I think that's going to show exciting things in 2026 off of that. So just to wrap up here, the keys to the game: stop the run for Boise State. I said that Boise State, the Rebel passing game is their highlight, it's their focus. So everyone's excited about the Calandria, but statistically, they're a better run team than they are a passing team. They're top 20 in rushing overall in the country. If you stop their run game, you will win this matchup. If you stop the quarterback run, Boise State didn't necessarily do, but they did it enough. And if you can stop the running backs, which they certainly did in this game, except for a couple of breakaway runs, if you can stop the running backs and you stop the quarterback, you will win this game by forcing UNLV to throw into your strength, which is the passing defense. And they certainly did that, so I'm going to give that a solid A overall. Adaptability over comfortability, coming in and playing aggressive, not allowing yourself to slip into those old habit patterns. First half, A+. Second half, like we said, close in the B- range. This is really a grading of the offense overall, so I'm going to give this a solid A- as well. And then for Boise State, do the little things right. They had no fouls in the first half. They finished the game with 3 fouls, which is still not bad, but they had no fouls in the first half. That was another reason Boise State was so effective. They didn't shoot themselves in the foot. They had 3 fouls in the entire game, and that is incredible. The discipline was there. Not really any drop passes. There was a couple of drop passes here and there. A couple bad throws here and there. But overall, Boise State played disciplined football. Again, not something we saw for the majority of the season. The fact that this team is figuring itself out now, yeah, it's disappointing to what it could have been, but it shows great signs for 2026, and that, at this point, is what we're looking forward to. So I'm going to give that a solid A as well. A+ potential if they didn't kind of start to drop a little bit of that in the second half. So, a Boise State team that will be going and facing Washington. I'm not going to talk too much about that right now because I'm already at an hour plus in this video. But for Boise State, a lot of things to be excited about for a program that at one point wasn't giving us very much to be excited about at all. A lot of things to be excited about. Some things that still need to be worked on, but a program that's certainly headed in the right direction. And I cannot wait to preview the Boise State versus Washington game. My special guest for that one is going to be the master football, Jake Posey, who has previewed every single bowl game over the last 4 years with me. And I cannot wait. We opened the season previewing Boise State, and I cannot wait to finish the season previewing the matchup versus Washington. That one won't be live video, unfortunately, because of when we are going to need to film that. It will be recorded, but I've loved having the conversation with each and every one of you in the live comments and the few live videos we've done but more than anything, I love having the conversations in the comments of all of my videos. So please let me know your thoughts on this game. I want to have that discussion and what you are looking forward to in 2026. And please, one last game preview anyway, join me here in a few days when Jake and I finally get that video up. Join us in the comments section. I cannot wait to see you all. One last opportunity. That'll be your last opportunity to try and win the Score Prediction Challenge. But more than that, it'll be one of your last opportunities to talk about a Boise State game, at least in the preview type sense of we don't know the results. But a last opportunity to look forward to a Boise State game for a very long and cold off season. before we get to see some more exciting things happening in 2026. So thanks so much for watching. Thanks for being here all the way through every single game preview. We've got one more to go, and I cannot wait. Next week, it's just around the corner. Almost feels like a regular season game because it's so close. It's a bowl, but it's just a week away. So can't wait to preview that. They'll be out in the next few days. Again, please let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure you subscribe. And as always, go Big Blue!